Welcome back. Tonight we are standing on a crag of black volcanic rock, high above a loch that no longer exists, on a morning that feels like any other. Below you, a market is waking up. Cattle are being driven up a muddy street between crooked wooden houses that lean toward each other like old friends sharing a secret. Smoke curls from 100 chimneys. A bell somewhere is ringing the hour. You would have no reason, standing here, to think that within living memory this city will bury its own dead behind sealed doors, burn to the ground not once but twice, and vanish for more than 2 centuries beneath the floor of a building that still stands today. Using AI reconstructions, historic paintings, and the findings of the archaeologists who have spent lifetimes digging beneath these streets, we are going to walk through Edinburgh as it actually was, layer by layer, century by century. And before we're done, you'll see exactly how these same stones and closes and courtyards look right now, in the present day, still standing, still lived in, still visited by millions of people every year. Long before anyone called this place Edinburgh, it was Din Eidyn, a fortified stronghold belonging to the Godaden, a Brittonic-speaking people who held the rock sometime around the 6th century. The crag itself is the plug of an extinct volcano, roughly 340 million years old, and it offered something no army could ignore. Sheer cliffs on 3 sides and a single approachable slope to the east, a natural fortress requiring almost no help from human hands. The people who lived here then were farmers, herders, and warriors, not builders of empires. They had no way of knowing that their hill fort would eventually pass to the Angles of Northumbria, who were believed to have given the rock the name that survives in Eidyn, fused later with the Old English, meaning fortified place. For centuries this was a contested border settlement, changing hands between Britons, Angles, and eventually the emerging Kingdom of Scotland, a modest huddle of huts and a wooden stockade with no cathedral, no palace, and no hint of the crowded vertical city it would become. The Norloch, an artificial lake created in the 1450s by damming a marshy hollow north of the castle for defense, would later separate the old medieval town from the new one, but for now, in these early centuries, there was only the rock, the ridge running east from it, and small communities clinging to survival on the edge of the North Sea's cold reach. By the time Edinburgh reached the height of its late medieval and early modern power, roughly the 15th through 17th centuries, it had become one of the most densely packed cities in Europe, built almost entirely along a single spine, the Royal Mile stretching just under 1 mile from Edinburgh Castle at its summit down to the Palace of Holyroodhouse at its foot. Because the city was hemmed in by the loch on one side and steep slopes on the other, builders had nowhere to go but up. Tenements known as lands rose 10, 12, in some reports as high as 14 stories, making Edinburgh's skyline, long before New York or Chicago, one of the tallest urban landscapes on Earth. The stone was dark, quarried locally, and the closes, narrow stepped alleyways barely wide enough for 2 people to pass, branched off the Royal Mile like ribs from a spine. Each one a self-contained neighborhood with its own well, its own gossip, its own smell of peat smoke and unwashed wool. Edinburgh Castle itself, perched at 130 meters above sea level, was in a near-constant state of repair and rebuilding throughout this period. Its defenses reworked after sieges, its chapel of St. Margaret, believed to be the oldest surviving building in the city, tucked almost apologetically within walls designed for cannon fire rather than prayer. This was never a finished city. Scaffolding, mud, and half-repaired walls were as much a part of daily life as the grand facades tourists imagine today. At the spiritual and civic heart of it all stood St. Giles, the High Kirk of Edinburgh, its crown-shaped spire visible from nearly every point in the old town. Inside, the building carried the marks of successive eras stacked on top of one another. Catholic altars and side chapels from its founding around the 12th century, later stripped and reordered after John Knox arrived in 1559 to preach the Reformation and turn Scotland decisively Protestant. Just outside its doors stood the Mercat Cross, where royal proclamations were read aloud to crowds, and the toll booth, a grim multi-purpose building that served as council chamber, courthouse, and prison, its walls sometimes decorated, grimly, with the heads of executed criminals as a public warning. Justice, faith, and governance were not separate institutions here. They occupied the same few hundred meters of street, visible to everyone who walked past on their way to buy bread or sell wool. And walking past was most of what people did because the Royal Mile and its closes were, in effect, the entire city. Estimates suggest that by the 1600s more than 40,000 people were crammed into an urban footprint barely a mile long, giving Edinburgh a population density that rivaled or exceeded much larger European cities. Nobles and beggars often lived in the same tenement, simply on different floors, the wealthy occupying the more accessible middle stories, while the poorest climbed to freezing garrets or descended into damp cellars. Waste was thrown from windows into the street below, accompanied by the shouted warning "Garde-à-l'eau," a corruption of the French for "watch out for the water," and the resulting stench was so notorious that Edinburgh earned the nickname Auld Reekie, Old Smoky, for the haze of smoke and odor that hung permanently over the rooftops. Vendors cried out prices for fish hauled up from Leith, children ran barefoot between market stalls, and the walls of certain closes still bear scratched initials and dates left by residents centuries ago, small human fingerprints pressed into stone. For public spectacle and gathering, nowhere mattered more than the Grassmarket, a wide-open space at the western foot of the castle rock that served for centuries as a livestock market, a fairground, and, less happily, the city's primary site of public execution. Hundreds of people are recorded as having been hanged here between the 1600s and late 1700s, including a number of Covenanters executed for their religious convictions. And on market days the same cobblestones that had hosted an execution that morning might host a horse fair by afternoon. The square could hold thousands of spectators, and it functioned as something close to Edinburgh's town square. Its identity, its rowdy communal heartbeat. If the Grassmarket revealed the city's rougher, communal side, the Palace of Holyroodhouse revealed its other face entirely. Built onto the site of an Augustinian abbey founded in 1128 and expanded into a royal residence from the 1500s onward, Holyroodhouse was where Mary, Queen of Scots, kept her private apartments, their walls hung with tapestries, their fireplaces carved with royal emblems, their windows looking out over manicured gardens rather than crowded closes. It was here, in 1566, that Mary's secretary David Rizzio was murdered in front of her. A scene of violence that proved even royal walls offered no true safety. Whatever comfort wealth and title purchased in this city, and it purchased a great deal, it could not, in the end, purchase protection from what was coming. That reckoning arrived most sharply in 1645, when bubonic plague swept through Edinburgh's crowded closes with devastating speed. Historians estimate that as much as half the city's population may have died or fled within months, the disease moving fastest through the poorest, most tightly packed alleyways where fresh air and clean water were hardest to come by. One close in particular, later known as Mary King's Close, is remembered in local tradition as having been so severely stricken that authorities are believed to have sealed off sections of it, walling up doors and windows, whether to contain contagion or simply because so many residents had died that the building stood empty is still debated by historians today. What is verified is that the close survived structurally even as the city built over and around it. In 1753, more than a century later, the Royal Exchange was constructed directly atop portions of the close, its lower floors and street simply absorbed into the foundations of the new building above, sealed in darkness, forgotten by everyone except the rumors that persisted among Edinburgh residents for generations afterward. For more than 200 years, Mary King's Close existed in a kind of suspended twilight beneath the city, accessible only through maintenance tunnels, its abandoned rooms and narrow stone passageway preserved almost exactly as they had been left, doorways at heights that reveal how much the street level had risen over centuries, fireplaces cold since the 1700s, the outlines of long-vanished tenements still visible in the stonework. Above it, Edinburgh moved on entirely unaware, building its elegant Georgian new town north of the old lock bed in the late 1700s, expanding, industrializing, becoming a modern British city while an entire 17th-century street lay silent and unseen directly beneath the feet of shoppers and clerks. It was not until the 20th century, and more thoroughly in the years following 2003, that the close was systematically excavated, studied, and opened to the public as a historic site. What archaeologists and historians found astonished them. Not gold or treasure, but the ordinary residue of ordinary lives, worn doorsteps, soot-blackened hearths, the ghost of a street plan frozen in place since before the union of the crowns. It offered something rarer than artifacts, a nearly untouched cross-section of how everyday Edinburgh residents actually lived, layered directly beneath the polished stone of the modern city above. It's worth pausing on that for a moment. Every close, every worn step, Every walled-up hearth beneath Edinburgh once belonged to someone with a name, a trade, a family waiting for them to come home. These were not ruins built to be admired. They were kitchens, workshops, and bedrooms, and the people who filled them never imagined they'd become history. Today, you can walk the full length of the Royal Mile in about 15 minutes, though almost no one does it that quickly. Edinburgh Castle still crowns the rock, now welcoming close to 2 million visitors a year, its ancient chapel of St. Margaret still standing, its ramparts still firing the famous 1 o'clock gun each day just as they have since 1861. St. Giles Cathedral remains open for worship and visitors, its crown steeple unchanged against the skyline, its interior still layered with memorials from every century since the Reformation. The Mercat Cross has been rebuilt and relocated slightly from its original spot, but still stands near St. Giles. While the old toll booth is long demolished, marked today only by a heart-shaped pattern set into the cobblestones, the heart of Midlothian, which passers-by still traditionally spit on for luck. The Grassmarket, once a place of livestock and executions, is now lined with pubs, restaurants, and independent shops, its dark history acknowledged by a small memorial to the Covenanters, but its atmosphere, on any given evening, closer to celebration than sorrow. The Palace of Holyroodhouse remains an official royal residence, still used by the monarch during an annual visit to Scotland, its staterooms and Mary's chambers open to the public most of the year. And beneath the Royal Exchange, now known as the City Chambers, Mary King's Close still runs through the darkness exactly where it always did, its stone passageways guided by lantern light, its centuries-old rooms preserved almost precisely as they were left, a genuine piece of the 17th century still breathing quietly under a 21st century city. That's Edinburgh. A city built up instead of out, buried and reborn more than once, still carrying its plague years and its palace intrigue and its market day noise in the very stones beneath your feet. Thanks so much for spending this time with me and walking through it. If there's a place, an event, or a lost civilization you'd like to see brought back to life next, drop it in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this one, a like and a subscribe genuinely helps this channel keep making them. I'll see you in the next one.